So let me pick up on one other question that a couple of you have referred to, which is the notion that complexity is a cultural issue. And I talked about it as a behavioral issue. And I mean, how do you root out complexity, bad complexity, value-destroying complexity, when it's built into the culture? I mean, this is one of those sort of soft things. It's even worse than a Nerf football because you can't really touch it. How do you get your arms around complexity as a cultural issue, which I think all of you have referred to or implied? Anyone want to start?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, the CEO who was there before Ken Fraser was a guy named Dick Clark, who also had done a lot of work trying to get after this within our company. And what he liked to say is you change the people or you change the people, which I don't think was unique to him, but I actually like the concept. And you know, for some reason, you've taken these people and put them in these roles, and I think to end up in a leadership role of a big company, there's some redeeming value that one brings. And I mentioned this notion of rewards and how you've been rewarded for certain behaviors and then you keep doing them. If, from a leadership perspective, you're saying, you know what, I'm going to do a course correction. Instead of aiming that way, I now want to aim that way. You actually need to encourage people to do a change in direction to get there, a course correction, if you will. And I think you give them the tools to do it, line up the incentives around it, help them get there, help them identify it. But if they fail at meeting those expectations, then you need to actually take other steps to kind of move them out. Because the most insidious thing is to have a CEO standing up saying, we're going to go do this. And then you have somebody that I would characterize, the phrase that I use is the keeper of the culture, who sits there and nods and says, yep, going to do that, and then goes off and behaves as they always have and actually retards all the change that you're trying to get done. So having the incentives aligned, having very clear accountability, and accountability has to be followed through on, otherwise it's meaningless. You know, many of us are parents, and we know what happens if we tell our kids not to do something, they do it, and we don't do anything. Well, shockingly, they continue to go do it. A puppy is not unlike the same thing, and although my daughters may not like the fact that I just compared them to our dog, but it's the same thing kind of holds true, and I think those things kind of go together.
All right. Well, it's fascinating. I'm not sure what, we've got the CEO, the managers, your children, and the dog. That's sort of all lined up in the same behavioral patterns. It's a very interesting analogy, Tom.
Am I wrong?
Peter?
I mean, when I took this role, I asked myself, how are we changing? How can we change behavior? And those of us who've spent some time in change management transformation know that, you know, how incredibly difficult it is. And I mean, what some of you said is, well, sometimes we have to change the people because it's so hard to change behavior. That's not always an option. And I wasn't given the, let's say, mandate to come up with some huge big splash for Bayer because we were just celebrating our 150th anniversary last year, so there was no room for any other big game-changing event. But if we go back, the main game-changing event which triggered the whole complexity reduction program was Marijn Dekkers, the CEO, coming on board. Now, what are big game changers in companies? Of course, crises that you referred to earlier. Some companies don't have a choice. They have to change. Then CEOs coming in. There may be others. Just yesterday, I heard from one of our country operations in Latin America, which did a phenomenal job. They actually did a big splash event. Obviously, this was not for the whole company. This was for a group of Latin America countries. But they really did big splash. The communication team and PR events, parties, really a launch pad of changing the culture with then very clearly communicated new guidelines, new etiquettes of how to behave. And I don't know, but I trust that they also tweak the rewards so that people actually have an incentive to change. This event took place last fall, so we'll see, what it gets to. But I would, as always in change management, I would look for positive traumatic events, because the negatives sometimes you can't control. So I would look for the positive traumatic events which are helpful in changing behavior. And then, of course, the rewards and recognition have to be aligned. So I agree with that. Yeah.
I think changing culture you don't go after by focusing on changing the culture. I think you focus on the business and actually achieving something. And as a byproduct, the way you do that, the how you get there, not just the what you achieve, is the change in the culture. So an example, we were all about having a high-performance culture, but it required a results-focused mindset everywhere. And if we weren't achieving results in the different aspects of the different areas of the company, it wasn't going to work. So you mentioned, Ron, the example of getting products out the door. We weren't getting products out the door. We hadn't had a new contact lens in 10 years. Our R&D department, highly complex, and their focus, their cultural focus was all on getting more patents. They wanted patents, and that was exciting to them. And we wanted products, so there had to be a cultural change. So one of the things we did that changed the culture very fast in R&D is we changed the name R&D. Changed it to D&R, Development and Research. You want to talk about upsetting your R&D people overnight. Even their cards, the signs, and it wasn't, just the name, but it was the point. They were going after home runs, big products that were going to come out 10 years from now. We said, let's hit some singles and doubles. And in hitting some singles and doubles, finding some molecular structure that would work with something else that we had, buying another product, doing combinations, things like that were simple to do, not quite as complex and long-term. We ended up creating 32 new products in 3 years and getting them to market. That was a cultural change in what we would call D&R.